Today, we're joined by Fang, who's going to be speaking a little bit on leadership. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Fang here with me onto the show. Fang, pleasure to speak with you today.
Pleasure to be here.
Hi, Fang. It's so nice to kind of meet you.
Hi, Becca. Likewise.
We're here to talk to you about leadership
Yeah.
and sort of what that looks like. So my first question for you is, what was your first experience with leadership at Carleton? What did you kind of learn from that?
My first experience for leadership was there was a couple of events organized by Despa Carleton, now Carleton Esports, and Carleton Student Engineering Society. So they were like, lands, they would happen overnight, I think in the atrium. And the president at the time knew a little bit about me. I did some streaming around Ottawa for various games. And he was like, hey, come and do this. I haven't really managed other people to do stuff before. Mm-hmm. So that was a little bit of a first, throughout school, right? You're from middle school, high school, university. There's sometimes, some little group projects. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna base this a little bit on my experience there. Yeah, that was it, and it ended up being going well. I had the technical knowledge to be able to tell people, hey, do this, do that. It wasn't too difficult managing people for at the time, we're all pretty similar minded. So they have a good gist of what it is that I wanted. That was, it was a pretty smooth foray into leadership outside of an academic curriculum for the first time.
Yeah, that was your first experience at Carleton. Was there any sort of notable times outside of Carleton after you graduated that you've been able to practice leadership?
Yes, I still not in the same capacity though. With Esports Carleton, it was managing a group of 300 people, maybe up to 1,000 if you count alumni and other participants from outside of the university, and maybe a group of 50 leadership position, other students, student leaders. Nothing like that post graduation. Also, I've been graduated a year.
Fair.
Yeah. But here and there, I still organize events. I still use the skill set I learned from my time there, and also professionally in some capacity as well. I work at marketing agency. I did websites, did ad campaigns, stuff like that. And now I'm taking a bit of not exactly a step down, but I'm not in the trenches as much, and it's more leadership focused, more managerial. So there's that.
Well, I know you're still involved with the Canadian Intercollegiate Exhibition. You actually brought me onto that. Have you been able to practice leadership there, or is it more so
not this year? No? Yeah, not this year. I'm thinking of maybe coming back next year to boost some stuff up. But right now, post grad, I'm getting into the swing of my own, kind of sort of center myself and reevaluate, reflect where I am and what I can continue to do and where my skill set would be best utilized.
Okay. So kind of being a leader of yourself first.
Oh yeah. I think that's very important, for everyone.
Self-leadership for sure. What would be sort of the most important skills in your mind for a leader to have?
One, the ability to listen to your subordinates, so to say. If we're really looking at that leadership, subordinate relationship, be able to listen to them and seriously consider what they are saying. Sometimes, they might not have something that is correct, but it's important to establish that culture of I am willing to listen to you and take you seriously. To delegation. I think that was the hardest one for me as a leader, because I really like doing everything myself. Bit of a perfectionist sometimes, a little a little too detail oriented. But as your organization or the scope of whatever project you're working on grows, you have to delegate. You don't have a choice there. You have to let other people, work on stuff too, because there's no other way.
Yeah, and I'm no one person is ever gonna be perfect at everything either. So if you try to take on everything, you're bound to make mistakes.
There's that. There's burning out. No, you have to delegate. You have to let other people step up.
Mhm. And this kind of boils to a question that I was going to ask later, but if you are someone who likes to sort of take charge and be a perfectionist, and you're working with people who do, they're learning and they have a tendency to make mistakes, as we all do, how can you sort of give them feedback or encourage them to improve without discouraging them?
So this varies case by case, right? If I had a more general workflow for this, I would say, like, first of all, reach out, contact them privately, and talk to them about like where the criticism stands. Depending on your relationship with this person, the tone of your language might come into play, right? You don't want to be extremely abrasive, but you also don't want to be too soft. You want them to take this seriously. This is where your work was subpar, or you didn't meet the deadlines or requirements, or whatever we had. And it's really up to you as a leader. Actually, I want to go back to like another, like, you were talking about like important skills for leaders. Adaptability. You have to be able to observe, analyze situations where they differ and what the best course is. Sometimes even like on a drop of a hat, drop of a dime, be able to adapt to your subordinates, your situation, and deliver a solution. Sometimes it's better like when everything's over, talk to them, or sometimes you want them. It's important that like, no, you correct course right away.
Yeah, this kind of translates into how would you describe like your leadership?
My preferred leadership style is definitely like lead with example. Be there in the trenches, side by side. These are my brothers and sisters, right? We're in here together working on this, and that has a lot of benefits. Sometimes like if they see you do this, it's inspirational. Sometimes it brings a certain amount of accountability, like self-accountability, like where your colleagues would be like, hey, if he's doing this, like, I gotta step up too. He's not on some ivory tower. But it also brings certain caveats. Sometimes some people like are like, hey, he's taking over. I'll cut loose, or like they don't learn, or again, like what I talked about earlier about like not delegating, not giving other people the opportunity to step up. You see this a lot in startups. A lot of startups, people wear a bunch of different hats, right? But as you move from a small organization into a medium-sized organization, you can't keep doing that. You have to change. Sometimes for me, I would have to change my leadership style. Something maybe, more authoritative, more autocratic, maybe even transactional. It's really how you motivate and how you, communicate to your delegates.
And on that topic of communicating, like back and forth, I assume you want to have that feedback loop. How would you, like, for anyone who's trying to be a leader, how would you go about accepting feedback? Because I know sometimes it can be hard to hear that you didn't really do well in leading a group.
First of all, open mind, open heart. It may not be things you want to hear. You have to really seriously consider the recourse of your actions, of making the changes necessary to improve. This is a little bit off topic, but tangentially, as a leader, it's important to cultivate a culture of learning, a learning environment, both for you as a leader, and for the team you're leading. In all my time being on both ends of that leader subordinate relationship, I haven't ever been in a successful project or organization that wasn't fostering a learning environment.
No, I mean, that works for both ways, because sometimes you have people in a project who are leaders who don't have experience in a leadership role. They need to learn too.
And you have to accept that they have to learn. They can't, like, sometimes they hit it out of the park. But a lot of times that's an unrealistic expectation, right? You have to kind of expect like they're not going to get it the first time.
Like, I guess that could go into sort of preparing for, if it's an event that you're hosting, leaving areas where mistakes can happen. And things won't just crumble if they do.
I mean, I'm not going to go out of my way to create a mistake, but as a leader, it's really up to you to be able to gauge if this delegate, this team member has the competency to tackle certain tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, like, if you feel like this is kind of like on the edge, do it. Give it to them. Give it to them. They might fail, and it's also up to you as a leader to have fail safes, right? To make sure that's kind of part of like project managing and like risk analysis, which is I guess also part of leadership. It's a lot of that, and if you want to be a leader, you're also going to be learning this, time after time. You might not get it like the first time.
I mean, it's learning experience, no matter how experienced you are.
Always, students for life, even if you graduate, right?
Definitely.
I just listening to you guys, I thought about when it comes, sometimes people, when they're working with a lot of really strong-headed people, and they also feel like they can take on that leadership role. What do you have any recommendations on how you can work with people that maybe they're trying to like not necessarily take over your role, but they're definitely trying to show that they are capable of doing it? And like heads are butting and stuff.
Mm-hmm. That is a fair point and an important part of like leadership. Also falls in a bit of like conflict resolution. Sometimes they butt heads with each other. Sometimes they're butting heads with you. I mentioned earlier about like serious consideration, right? Mm-hmm. Take what they're saying seriously. If the suggestion can be effectively put into practice without like too much risk, give it a go. It has to be kind of like in a situation, if it does fail, like, it's not too much of an impact. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there are certain characters who are, they don't exactly always have like the best intentions with you in place.
Maybe like kind of trying to undermine you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like that happens. That's a thing that happens. In those situations, short term, you kind of have to push to make them realize like, hey, we're all working towards the same thing, which is the success of this project. Afterwards, like long term, kind of like have to hunker down and evaluate if this team member, if the value they bring to the team, to the project is worth having. Like, sometimes it can be a headache. Or if, you're willing to work through this and work with them to find their spot in the team. Sometimes if you see it like, appropriate, you can even like elevate them, bring them to, a higher position, more authority, more power. If like it seems like, they have the competency and they have the clear-mindedness. Sometimes that can backfire, not gonna lie. And sometimes like you even like, there are times where you step down, right? Like, for example, like a lot of student leader positions here at Carleton, like they're a student, they're not going to be here forever, right? Sometimes like that's also part of being a leader, is the consideration that you might have to step down, and what is going to be your turnover process? Who's going to step up? What are the criteria? What is the process? That's equally as important as being the leader.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure a big part of that is like recognizing who in your group may not necessarily at that moment be ready for a leadership position, but they might be able to have that sort of thrust on them.
Absolutely. Like going back, like I think it's Shakespeare who said this like famous quote. Some people are born great, some people achieve greatness, some people have greatness thrust upon them. Mm-hmm. And for me, like it was a little bit like that. Like, I was just doing stuff. I was good at certain things. And, the president at the time was like, hey, do this, be like, kind of the leader in here. And then eventually I became the president of the club, somehow. Yeah, no, it really was like that. And sometimes you might notice certain people within your organization, within your team, that have great competencies, but aren't willing to put themselves forward. Now, I'm not saying like trying to force on it when they're not willing to like accept it. Like, hey, they might have other commitments. Having a leadership position so it can be stressful, I'm not gonna lie. It can be a time sink. But hey, if they're a bit on the defense and they're open-minded to it, why not? Give them a little push. See if they'll fly.
Well, I mean, like on that topic of having leadership thrust upon you, I don't know if you remember, but 2 years ago, I applied for to be an officer for CSGO.
Yeah.
Part of CU Esports now.
Yeah.
And you reached out to me and said that, so, hey, do you want to be a game head instead? Which is like sort of like leading that community. And,
Yeah.
you know, maybe insignificant to you at the time, like kind of trivial to reach out, but like for me, that sort of spearheaded my own leadership within the club. And like since then, I've helped you with Crossfire.
Yeah.
Full orientation game night. And it's like I never saw myself in that position until that opportunity was in front of me. So,
And you got to admit, like, that cultivated certain, and then right now, valuable skill sets. like,
Definitely.
moving forward.
definitely. No, so I mean, like, thank you for that. But like it really speaks to that testament of like sometimes it just has to be thrown to you and see what you can do with it.
Yeah.
And for my final question, kind of as well as for someone who maybe wants to do leadership and maybe feels uncomfortable with that idea, maybe doesn't even know where to start. Do you have any ideas of like places around Carleton, for example, that might offer that leadership opportunity?
For sure. Clubs and societies, there's definitely room to express, your leadership capabilities. There are leadership opportunities there. Sports, whether it's just like leading an intramural team, just sometimes it's even just like your little rec group, right? And there's varsity, big leadership, right? If you make the team, that's definitely displaying like your capabilities for leadership, even if you're not in a leader position, right? Yeah, at that point, you have certain responsibilities being a student athlete. And another thing is consult your professors, like faculties. They have projects of their own sometimes, right? When I was in information technology, we had this one professor. He was doing game jams once a year, part of Global Game Jam, and I attached myself to that to try to help him, elevate him, volunteered my time. And those are all fantastic opportunities around Carleton to display leadership.
How have you taken your leadership skills that you learned as a student and like transferred them into what you're doing today, like post grad?
Effective communication. That is so important. And it's not just like a language thing, just being able to touch base, frequent replies, making sure everyone stays in the loop, make sure the appropriate people stay in the loop. Effective communication will get you so far in life. And it's one of those skills that is a building block because you can branch it out to learning so much more skills, including leadership, right? It's a subset, it's a facet of leadership, but you can learn more with it, right? This goes off leadership a bit, but it's important that the skill sets you learn here, you don't see them as void. It's a bit of a perspective thing. The skills you learn in class, in student life, they're not just for that class, for here in a student. You can take them and apply them elsewhere. You could take them and use them to learn a deeper skill. I don't think I've ever learned a skill that didn't resemble kind of like a tree, right? Taking visual arts maybe as an example, like you learn how to draw, you learn like some of the basic understandings of what like visual elements are. You apply that, you learn Photoshop, keeps going. Your skill is not a dead end. Your skill can always lead to different skills or a deeper understanding of that skill. Never stop learning. Never stop.
Students for life.
Oh yeah. One more thing I just wanted to like add on. I feel like when people think of leadership, they always immediately go to leading like a group of people. But I find that when people leave their student life, they often have to become the leader for just themselves, like advocating for themselves to get the job that they want, or like they have to like find a different community because it's not so easy. Have you noticed that you've become more of a leader for yourself alone too after graduating?
Absolutely, but that's a little bit even before graduating, right? When you're a student, right? Sometimes you're thrust into this university, this post-secondary world, and you have a lot of freedom, right? You might, let's say, like maybe sometimes parents aren't yet there. You're free, and you have to build structure out of your own life. That's self-leadership. Being able to succeed, make it all through the 4, maybe 5 years post-grad in university. You have to have a certain sense of self-discipline, self-structure. Sometimes, some people, it's not super rigorous. Sometimes some people, it's very rigorous, but it's always there. You have to have a sense. Sometimes it's like, joining clubs, being part of some recreational activities. Sometimes it's hunkering down, studying, but that's always there. Self-leadership.
Self-leadership is so much harder than Well, I think it's so much harder than leading a group of people. And I don't know, it's just all the accountability just for myself. But
Yeah.
At least when other people are counting on you, it's a bit of a push to stay.
oh, yeah.
on,
Cause
you
I'm
know?
like, oh, I can't. This was said earlier. I can't let them down,
Yeah,
but letting
yeah.
myself down, I don't know. That's not so bad. Like,
Yeah.
Well, like it's that thing where like, you become used to it, right? Oh, I've let myself down in the past so many times. It's kind of be like, what's one more time? Right?
yeah.
It takes a lot of discipline to not only be like, this stops now, but also if it does happen again, being able to pick yourself back up and not let it happen again, right?
As a last takeaway, do you have any, piece of advice for the students back at home?
I gotta say, like, I wouldn't be in this position if I wasn't standing on the shoulders of giants, right? You're getting me on here for the topic of leadership, very flattering. But like sometimes, in my experience, like, I've been in the presence of some amazing leaders, both as a student in my professional life, and even the former co-presidents of the Carleton Esports Club, and their founders. They've been a huge influence in my life, and me taking on that leadership role is kind of like paying it forward, right? Them giving the opportunities to me, I'm going to give opportunities to others and teach others, right? So being a good leader is also about paying it forward.
That's an excellent note to end on then. Be fun. Thank you for coming on to the show with me.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us. It was lovely to meet you.
Likewise.
Well, thank you to Fang for coming on to the show. It's been a pleasure speaking with him. And thank you, the listener, for tuning in. I've been Martin Curry, and I was joined by my co-host, Rebecca Weston, and this is the Life Skills team signing off.